Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. And if you're a true General Hospital fan, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get started with today's video. The late afternoon sun hung low over the Quartermain house, creating long shadows across the wooden dock that stretched out across the calm waters of the lake. The subtle aroma of pine and damp dirt lingered in the air, accompanied by the distant sound of children laughing someplace near the main house. Scout had just finished her swim practice, her little body cutting cleanly through the water before she emerged, drenched and proud. Danny had also been there, and the two of them were talking quietly about meeting Alexis at Bobby's. They slipped out one by one, leaving the pier quieter than it had been throughout the day. Nina stood alone by the boathouse, her hands lightly resting on the grips of Drew's wheelchair. The chair sat at the top of the little hill that led down to the water's edge, its wheels locked, the man inside silent and still. Drew had been in that odd, locked-in position for weeks. Eyes open, mind plainly operating, but body refusing to obey any commands. The physicians termed it transitory. Nina had started to suspect otherwise. She had hoped otherwise. She had just finished delivering another message to Jack Brennan. Her voice in the audio was strained, almost pleading. "Jack, please call me back. Please. Willow is talking about running. She claims that the leverage is gone. If that's true..." She paused, unwilling to say anything else. The rest was unfathomable, but it rested in her chest like a rock. Willow had already departed for the house, intending to pack a suitcase and get the kids. New identities. An airport. A life on the run. Nina had attempted to talk her out of it, but Willow's face was fixed in that determined expression that reminded Nina of herself. "We can't wait anymore," Willow had remarked. "If Brennan does not come through, Drew wakes up and tells everyone what I did. What we did. I will not allow that to happen to the children." Nina was now alone with the situation. She freed the chair's wheels with a quiet click. The noise seemed too loud in the silence. She had no clear plan, just the abrupt, piercing realization that time was running short. Drew was improving. Everyone could see it. His fingers make little movements. The way his eyes followed talks. The words would soon arrive, and everything would crumble. "What's wrong, Nina?" The voice was scratchy, and used, and unmistakable. Nina's hands had frozen on the chair. She looked down. Drew's eyes were open and fixed on her, with a small, bitter curve in the corner of his mouth. "Got some awful news?" She was speechless for a brief moment. The world was reduced to the sound of water lapping against the pilings and the steady beat of her own pulse. She knew this moment would come. She'd imagined it 100 different ways. None of them had prepared her for the sheer reality of his voice. She recovered more quickly than she expected. "Bad for me," she responded, her voice strangely calm. "Worse for you." She then pressed. The wheelchair moved forward with unexpected ease. The incline handled the rest. Drew's hands jerked against the armrests, but the straps kept him in place. There was a brief, almost elegant moment when the chair appeared to hang at the dock's edge before tipping over. The splash was loud and dirty. Water erupted upward. The chair slipped beneath the surface, carrying Drew with it. Nina stood motionless, staring at the spot where he had vanished. Bubbles rose. The surface settled. For several long seconds, there was nothing but the normal sounds of a summer afternoon. The camera that had been recorded from the far side of the boathouse then caught the identical frame, Nina's hands still outstretched, her face a mask of shock and something darker, the empty dock, the growing rings of water. She hadn't planned for a camera. She hadn't planned for any of this. Only hours ago, Alexis had urged Scout not to push her father's chair too close to the brink. A casual comment. A spark. Nina had carried that flame into the boathouse and kept it near as Willow discussed airports and new names. By the time the children left, the spark had turned into a decision. She moved one step closer to the edge, then another. The lake was darker than it appeared from a distance. She could see the faint outline of the chair beneath the surface, tilted, with one wheel still spinning slowly. Drew's face was inclined upward, his eyes wide, and his mouth moving silently. He was still conscious. Of course he was. A man who had survived wars, betrayals, and a bullet to the head would not die quietly. Nina's mind raced for the next few minutes. If she yelled right now, someone would come. If she waited, the minutes would lengthen. Drew was muscular, but the chair was heavy and the straps were securely fastened. 4 minutes. Perhaps 5. Whether or not they had received Navy SEAL training, their lungs had limits.
She didn't yell.
Instead, she stood motionless, watching the bubbles diminish. Her hands trembled by her sides. A voice at the back of her mind, similar to her own, told her that this was the only way. Willow and the kids would be protected. The truth about the accident, the drugs, and everything that had brought them here would be buried with Drew at the bottom of Quartermain Lake. A bird called from the treetops. A dragonfly glided across the surface a few feet away. The everyday world resumed as if nothing had happened. Then action. A darker form shifts beneath the water. Drew's arm, free of one strap, extended upward. Fingers broke through the surface, grasping for breath. Nina stepped back immediately. The hand sank again. She recalled Willow's expression when she learned her mother had slept with Brennan.
The distaste.
The treachery. Nina had done it for leverage, protection, and the same reason she is standing here today. Everything had always been about protection. Or so she told herself. The lake's surface became motionless again. The bubbles had ceased. Nina breathed in quick, shallow bursts. She looked toward the boathouse and then back to the sea. The camera on the far wall continued to record silently, its red light a small, steady eye that no one had remembered to turn off following Scout's practice. She needed to do something. Standing here indefinitely wasn't an option. If someone found her like this, the inquiries would start immediately. She needed a tale. An accident. The chair had rolled. She had attempted to halt it. She had plunged in after him, but the weight proved too much. Yes, that could work. She removed her shoes and stepped to the edge. She was surprised by how chilly the water was when she jumped. It closed over her head with a shock, forcing the air out of her lungs. She surfaced, gasping, and started swimming toward the location where the chair had gone under. Her skirt wrapped around her legs. She dove, eyes wide in the murky green, hands searching. She discovered the chair's back first. Metal. Cold. She pulled, but it hardly moved. Drew's body was still strapped in, with a pallid face and closed eyes. She fumbled with the straps, her fingers slipping on the wet fabric and plastic. One became free, then another. Drew's body lifted up somewhat, but his head stayed underwater. Nina surfaced again, her lungs scorching. She yelled, high and terrified, and the sound carried across the river to the house. Help! Please help! Drew is in the water. The words tasted odd in her mouth, at once false and true. She dove once more, wrapped her arm around Drew's torso, and kicked hard at the surface. His weight pulled her down. She managed to lift his face above water for a few seconds before they both submerged again. Her arms were trembling when she rose for the second time. She could hear voices now, far and approaching. Gio spoke first, clearly and urgently. Then Brooklyn's. Footsteps hammering against the dock. Nina held one arm around Drew while the other thrashed against the dock side. Her legs kicked weakly. She wasn't a strong swimmer. The chill was soaking into her bones. Drew's head drooped against her shoulder. She couldn't tell whether he was breathing. Hands reached down. Strong hands.
Joe's.
With a single forceful motion, he hauled Drew up onto the planks and reached for Nina. She let herself be yanked out, water dripping from her clothes and her hair stuck to her face. She dropped onto the dock, coughing, her gaze fixed on Drew's lifeless form. Gio was already beginning CPR. Compressions.
Breaths.
The rhythm is firm and practiced. Brooklyn knelt alongside him, holding a phone to her ear and calling for aid. Nina raised herself up onto her elbows and watched the spectacle as if from afar. The camera on the boathouse wall had caught everything.
The push. The splash.
The lengthy minutes of quiet. Nina took a dive. She yells. The rescue. Every frame sat there, waiting. Sirens began to sound in the distance. Nina's imagination continued to make up the story she would tell. The chair had rolled. She had attempted to halt it but failed. She'd gone in after him without thinking. She had done all she could. She watched Drew's expression as Geo worked. Color was slowly returning. A cough. Water poured from his mouth. His eyes flickered open for a second, unfocused, before closing again. Nina experienced a cold sensation in her stomach that had nothing to do with the lake water. He was alive.
For now.
The late afternoon sun hung low over the Quartermain estate, creating beautiful golden ribbons across the lake's surface. The sea appeared almost peaceful, a deceptive serenity that concealed the currents beneath. Nina Reeves stood on the wooden pier outside the boathouse, arms crossed tightly against her chest, watching the wheelchair in front of her as if it could move on its own. Drew Kane remained motionless, his head tilted slightly toward the ocean, maintaining the same blank expression he had for weeks. The medical specialists had referred to it as a locked-in state, a horrible limbo in which the mind remained alert while the body ignored all commands. Nina had learned to discern the smallest symptoms of improvement, the rare flex of a finger, the tightening of a jaw, and each one had filled her with a chilly dread that grew deeper with each passing day. Scout and Danny had left only minutes before, the girl excitedly talking about seeing Alexis at Bobby's, and Danny trailing behind her with that quiet Morgan dedication. Nina forced a grin, vowed to get Drew home soon, and watched them disappear up the walk. When their voices faded, the silence on the pier felt as heavy as the summer heat. She slipped her phone out of her pocket and dialed Jack Brennan again. The call went directly to voicemail. Her voice sounded rougher than she intended. "Jack, this is Nina. Willow claims we have nothing left. No leverage. Nothing. You should call me back.
Right now.
Before someone does anything irreversible." She hung up the phone and slipped it away, her gaze fixed on Drew's back. The wheelchair sat a few feet from the dock's edge, brakes locked and wheels tilted just enough toward the water to send it rolling with a careless nudge. Scout had set it up earlier, so her father could watch her swim. Alexis advised the girl not to come too close. Nina had received the warning and felt something dark and useful click into place. She got closer, squatting by the chair. The metal of the brake lever felt warm against her fingers. With a simple move, the wheels would be free. With one strong push, Drew Kane's problem would drop beneath the surface of Quartermain Lake, weighty, silent, and final. Her hands trembled. She told herself it was the residual adrenaline from her previous intense chat with Willow. Willow was already packing bags and coming up with new names for the youngsters. Willow, who gazed at her mother with a mix of desperation and accusation, was certain that all options had been exhausted. Nina pushed her thumb against the brake. The mechanism disengaged with a quiet metallic click. That's when the voice arrived. "What's wrong, Nina?" It was rough and used and unmistakably Drew. The comments had a dry, sarcastic edge that pierced directly through the humid air. "Got some awful news?" Nina froze. Her entire body froze for a single suspended second as her mind struggled to comprehend the incomprehensible.
He could speak.
The paralysis was ending. The carefully kept hush that had sheltered them for weeks had finally shattered. She rose slowly, gazing down at his face. The blankness was gone. His eyes were keen and focused, filled with the same calculating intelligence that had made him so deadly prior to any injection or pharmaceutical constraint. A small, frigid smile tugged on the corner of his mouth. Nina's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Every meticulously planned strategy, every late-night calculation, every desperate hope that Jack would deliver the black box on time, none of it mattered anymore.
Drew could speak.
Drew could tell everyone what Willow had done. Drew might devastate the precious world she had battled so hard to preserve for her daughter and grandchildren. She discovered her voice. It came out low and steady, nearly calm. "Bad for me," she said. "Worse for you." Drew's smile faded for an instant. Nina's hands then found the wheelchair's handles. She didn't hesitate. There was no second thought, no moral calculation, no flashback to the years they had spent together or the tangled web of family ties that still connected them. There was only one immediate, unequivocal necessity: silence.
She shoved.
The wheelchair moved forward with unexpected ease. The unlocked wheels caught the dock plank's small downward slope. For a half-second, the chair appeared almost graceful, floating toward the river as if it had chosen its own path. The front wheels then hit the edge, tipping the frame and allowing gravity to take over. Drew's body jerked when the chair tipped forward. He let out a single piercing sound, half grunt, half shout, before the entire device collided with a massive, hollow splash. Water shot up in a sparkling arc. The chair fell quickly, weighted by metal and, with the man still strapped onto it, bubbles formed in frenetic groups. The lake's surface closed over where he had been, leaving only expanding rings that raced outward before softening into nothingness. Nina stood at the dock's edge, breathing heavily. Her hands remained outstretched, her fingers curled, as if they were holding the handles. The water settled. Several little waves crashed against the wooden pilings. The late light resumed its steady descent, painting the lake in tones of amber and rose as if nothing had happened. She waited. Seconds are stretched. The bubbles thinned. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called. The estate stayed quiet. Nobody came running. There was no alert from the house. Scout and Danny had already gone. Willow was somewhere across town preparing to sprint. Jack still hadn't called. Nina's legs felt wobbly. She took one step away from the edge, then another. The truth of what she had done slammed against her chest like a physical burden. There was no reversing it. If anyone witnessed it, there was no way to justify it as an accident. The dock was vacant. The water was deep enough. Drew Kane, with all of his secrets, threats, and regained might, lay beneath that placid veneer. She made herself stare at the water again. Nothing cracked the surface. No hand. There's no struggle. Only a gentle rolling of the lake against the beach. A peculiar silence fell over her. The panic that had fueled the shove began to fade, replaced by a colder, more practical awareness. She needed to decide what would happen next. Scream for rescue and portray a distraught woman who has witnessed a horrific accident? Slip away and say she left him safe on the dock? Or do you stay to assure full silence? Her phone vibrated inside her pocket. She ignored it. In the moment, it didn't matter whether it was Jack, Willow, or someone else. The only thing that mattered was the dark water in front of her, and she knew that every second that passed without movement above the surface brought her closer to an irreversible answer. Nina's gaze moved to the boathouse door, and then back to the water. The sun has descended lower. Shadows lengthened along the dock. A gentle breeze moved the surface, causing 1,000 tiny reflections to dance and fade. She remembered Scout's cheerful face earlier that afternoon, and the pride in her voice when she beat her swimming time. She remembered Willow's terror, how her daughter's hand shook when she spoke new identities and leaving Port Charles forever. She reflected on the lengthy series of decisions that had brought them all here, affairs, falsehoods, and desperation built atop desperation until the only remaining alternative felt like this one. The water remained unbroken. Nina took a slow breath. The air smelled like lake, warm wood, and the slight metallic tang of the wheelchair that was no longer present. She relaxed her hands and let her arms drop to her sides. A clock might have been ticking somewhere within the house, marking the typical passage of time, but out here on the dock, time seemed paused, caught in the interval between the shove and whatever came next. She moved her head slightly to listen.
Still nothing.
No faraway voices. There are no approaching footsteps. The estate maintained its secrets in the same way it always had. Nina took one more look at the location where the chair had vanished. The rings in the water had long since faded. The surface appeared virtually smooth again, reflecting the sky if it had never been disturbed. She took another step back, then another, until she was several feet from the edge of the dock. Her phone vibrated again. This time, she reached for it with her thumb lingering over the screen. The name on the display had no significance. The message on the other end didn't matter. What mattered was the decision she was still making in the silence of her mind, whether to sound the alarm or let the water keep what it had taken. The sun sank lower. The light on the lake changed from gold to copper. Nina Reeves stood alone on the pier of Quartermain Lake, the weight of her decision settling about her like the approaching dusk, while beneath the surface the implications of that decision continued their silent, irrevocable descent.